Yes, hello. Thank you very much again. Hello again. Good afternoon, everybody. My previous speakers have already mentioned the EMT, and I've been asked to present it from the point of view of a non-EU member. Like the Ukraine, Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, but we have access to organizations like the EMT as a non-EU observer. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what opportunities on the basis of our experiences you could have if your universities, if your programs, not universities, but programs, could have access to the EMT. I'll explain about membership, I'll explain about the forums, and I'll explain about my particular institutional benefits. Now, first of all, there is information online. There's less information than there used to be online, but there is information online. And, you know, links are great, but I always forget them. I just go to Google, EMT, DGT, you're bound to find it. Those two, they're fairly unique search strings. And on that website, the European Masters in Translation, this is the meaning of EMT, you will find a lot of information about the European Masters. In a nutshell, the actual EMT itself stands for European Masters in Translation. It's a network, and it's actually a project, a partnership project between the DGT and higher education institutions that offer MA translation programs. The intentions are quite clear. First, quality of translation training, upgrade it. Second, help language professionals integrate better into the labor markets, our graduates. Thirdly, elevate the status of translation professions in the EU by promoting visibility and creating, shall we say, acceptable standards of graduate performance. Now, the output of the EMT, we've had a lot of references over the last 2 days to competencies and the competence framework. This is the major output, really, the competence framework as a model for curriculum design. Now, that model, you can go onto the website and download this competence framework. It contains, it's about 6 pages long, I think, and contains about 35 descriptors separated into the categories mentioned by Thomas. Incidentally, Prague is obviously a member, or Charles University is a member of the EMT, so is Bart's institution, Ghent. But a lot of people perhaps overlook the fact that this isn't an academic network. It's a network of academics so that they can talk about the profession itself and train students in alignment with the profession. So there are very, very close ties between the members, the forums, and the language industry itself within Europe. What about membership? Well, unfortunately, you've just missed the last membership round. Membership rounds occur every 5 years, and the last round was last month, basically, December 2018. I don't know if any Ukrainian institutions have actually applied for membership. I won't embarrass anybody by asking, just in case I do. But basically, Ukrainian institutions would have been eligible because the eligibility, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Eligibility is not only for member states, but EEA members of the European Economic Area, ENP participants, of which Ukraine is one, the European Neighborhood Policy, Russia, and Switzerland, where I am. To become a member, basically, there are a few other things that you have to report on, but basically it's centered on alignment with the competence framework, the ability to fulfill the competence framework descriptors. But being a member just doesn't mean having benefits. You have certain obligations. You should participate in EMT meetings and events, and you should contribute actively to the work of the EMT. We do. It's not just that with observer status you just sit back and look. You have to be part of the network. You have to bring yourself in, which is the whole point of this particular network. You have to actually contribute. But it's beneficial. Now, if we look at the structure and the tasks of the EMT, it's a very simple overview here. It's administered, really, it's looked after by a board. There are 10 representatives taken from the members at the moment, and 2 DGT representatives. In this case, I think the Director General himself is a member. I think you are a member as well, are you not? Yes, Thomas is a member. I don't know, Bart's colleague Sonia is also a member of the board. Membership at the moment, as the round coming to an end now, is it's spread across 16 universities. There are 64 programs that are accredited. But as I said, it's the program that becomes a member, not the university per se. The university is, of course, in the background. Now, there are tasks. Tasks are defined at the beginning of a period, and you have to fulfill certain tasks. And what happens is work packages. The board establishes work packages, and these are the 4 work packages of the last, or as I said, the round just coming to an end, the 5 years in which we were a member. There were various working groups on employment and the future of the profession, on translation tools and technologies, on collaborative learning and e-learning technologies, and on traineeship and professionalization. Here you see quite clearly here that what we have is an organization that is really trying to move academia and the industry and the professions closer together. But please, it is not just a way of serving the European institutions with translators. This is not the idea. The idea is that the whole of the European translation industry benefits from its initiative. Of course, part of that is will involve working for the EU institutions, but it goes far beyond that. It is not just about creating programs to train institutional translators. I think I must emphasize that because, of course, it would be nonsense for a Swiss organization to do that because as our Swiss students would never be able to access the EU as full professionals, as administrators, as officials. There is also an EMT research group, again, bringing together the various members of the organization, of the network, so that they can conceive research, didactically oriented research in this case, that would be useful to the development of the professions and, above all, the development of how to teach professionals. You see a plethora of possible forums and exchanges here, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what the forums are for members. And this is quite important for you because you will, as a Ukrainian institution, if you decide to think about joining, you will have access to some of these from a very, very early stage. There is a permanent online network for members. It's a Yammer network. And it involves exchanges to achieve those work package goals, for instance. They will create groups, and groups will exchange information and develop documents, so on and so forth. There are 2 annual network meetings per year, one in March, usually in Brussels, and one in October or November in another member country. At least one of those, usually the second one, will be attached to a conference of some sort. Not always, but it has been the case over the last couple of years. But the network also cooperates quite closely with the Translating Europe project, which is, again, an attempt to bring the industry together with the trainers and the EU institutions. Now, there is an annual Translating Europe forum in Brussels in November, generally. And there are a number of Translating Europe workshops, which are very small-scale national events, workshop events, half-day, day events, that take place in member countries throughout the year. situated in, on topics such as collaborative real learning or using certain tools, so on and so forth. It's very useful. Now, these are designed for professionals, for students, and for trainers, so trainers can train themselves. And guest participation is possible at selected events. Now, I am not privileged to talk about this. I am simply a member, representative of a non-EU institution. For further information about that, I would suggest strongly that you get in touch with the board, or ask Thomas. He's here. Now, the opportunities generally for members are quite obvious. First of all, the network is a quality label. It's a benchmark. Being a member or being associated with it raises your profile and visibility. It gives you the opportunity to share, to co-develop, and to benchmark competencies. We worked together on this competence profile. It wasn't just imposed on us. We all worked together. I was in the group, you were in the group, we all worked on this. You can share resources, you can share methodologies, methods, how to teach. And in a sense, you are co-developing also requirements. You can network with the institutions, of course, quite directly, but also industry is often present at these meetings. And another advantage is, if you're in this network, you are a member of a network that has negotiating power. One example is we get cheaper CAT tools, for instance, if not free, and as a member. And you do have access, in Switzerland is a bit of a different case, but if you are in the EU, definitely you have access to short-term work placements for students, and under certain circumstances, it would be possible for non-EU members to have work placements. In Switzerland, we're in a strange position because we do have a lot of EU nationals or binationals. We have people with an Italian background, for instance, and an Italian passport living in Switzerland. Switzerland is one of those strange countries where you have about 30% of the population is actually non-Swiss. So, although they grow up there and they can only speak Swiss German, for instance. It's a very interesting phenomenon. What about our particular benefits? Well, I've tried to put them together into three categories. First, profiling. Achieving a certain profile. We have found that it helps student recruitment. Quite definitely. Mentioning the fact that we are in the EMT networks makes us attractive. Unfortunately, the other Swiss institute that trains translators is also a member, so we don't have a huge advantage, but nevertheless, it is an advantage. Geneva, I'll mention that name, it also has a program. But it also helps with the employment of the students, increasing, if the students point to the fact that they are educated by an EMT institution, it does help them get jobs. Not just in the EU, also in Switzerland. It also helps us as an institution. We become more visible, and accreditation becomes easier. We are also a member of a large international organization called SUTI, and I'm absolutely convinced that one of the reasons that our access to SUTI was so easy was that we had previously joined the EMT. So it does give you credit. In terms of teaching, this is, I think, where the biggest benefits have been up till now. Joint initiatives are possible, we share competencies and we share resources. By resources, obviously, somebody mentioned yesterday, I think, that we, as a member, have access to e-translation, the EU translation tool. We can get CAT tools cheaper if we want them. But also we have access to people. We have also had visiting translators coming to us who have been learning from the way Switzerland does things. Swiss banks translate, for instance, but at the same time, they're training our trainers and our students, but they're above all training our trainers in the newest techniques. We were, a while back, the EU, the Commission used to have a web translation unit, and we invited, they came down for 2 weeks to train our trainers, not in web translation, but in particular aspects of search engine optimization, for instance, which helps, which is part of web translation. Another thing is that if I mention Bart's Institute, for instance, via the EMT, we suddenly had a couple of students who had Dutch in their combination. And so Ghent lent us their trainers, basically. We got them down, they trained our people, our students. Very fruitful exchange. We have yet to be invited back, but I'm sure we will. Okay. We are now negotiating double or dual degrees. Now, somebody earlier mentioned, I think it was you, Ilya, you mentioned the fact that, are we going to talk about translators or computer linguists in future? Are we going to recruit? Now, of course, no program on earth can cover everything. We can't cover everything. But we are now negotiating with certain other programs within the EMT and also outside to do a dual degree. And one of our strategic objectives is to have a dual degree with a computer linguistics program, so that our graduates can do their degree with us and do another semester and top up and get a second degree from that partner institution. Being a member of the EMT, being associated with the EMT, facilitates that process, because I know that I don't have to separately accredit that program. I don't have to look at the quality of that program. It is already accredited as a member of the EMT. So I can quite, with good conscience, sign a double degree with them, and they with us. And finally, we do have, through this network, an incredible increase in staff and student exchange agreements. Switzerland, again, being outside the EU, doesn't have access to Erasmus, but it's created its own shadow program, and via this shadow program, we call the Swiss European Mobility Program, and through that particular program, we are able to attract a lot of concrete exchanges with EMT universities. And finally, sorry, I keep pushing the wrong button. Research. We do a lot of what's called transdisciplinary research. Part of our brief is to get money from industry, work together with industry. I can't do research at my institution without it being funded by industry. So basically, or should we say industry in the broader sense, institutions. Via this network, we had access to other members with which we can do research. We are, at the moment, planning something with Ghent. With institutions, we have done process research with the European Parliament, for instance, via our EMT connections, and with the industry itself, where we, again, have been doing ergonomic research with industrial partners. All of this access wouldn't have been possible without the EMT, or shall we say, would have been harder without the EMT. So basically, again, further information is available on Google. Sorry, not on Google, on the website, via Google. If you just, as I said, put in EMT and DGT, you're bound to find the website. And thank you very much. Thank you.